A raw deal, harder to get a job, harder to pay the rent and harder to find your way. Nearly 1 million young people are not working or learning. This morning, we'll ask what's gone wrong. Some of them tell us they're not the problem.
Insecure jobs, low starting salaries and the rising living costs, it's making it really hard for people around my age to be able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Well, it's Pat McFadden's job to sort it out. The Welfare Secretary is here, and later we'll be joined by his opposite number, Helen Whately from the Conservatives. And if the two of them can't fix it, other alternatives are available. Your party is one of the new political outfits trying to scoop up young voters. One of the party's founders, MP Zarah Sultana, is here after the party's bumpy birth. And just in case, perish the thought, you're not quite in the mood for Christmas yet, we have a soothing taster from Matteo Bocelli to take you there.
Fall on your knees. Oh, hear the angel's voice.
Morning, and a big hello to our panel this morning. Journalist Eva Santina Evans, James Reid, the Chairman and Chief Executive of the Reid Group of Companies, and campaigner Lawrence Newport, who was one of the founders of Looking for Growth, who does what it says on the tin. Thank you all very much for being with us this morning. Let's start, as we always do, with what's making the news. Well, you might remember the boss of the Unite union told us a few weeks ago how unhappy she is with Labour. The Sunday Telegraph suggests they might split away from the party. Well, the Sunday Times claims David Lammy is not quite telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth when it comes to the stats on rape trials. The Observer's front page is a moody black and white shot of Keir Starmer with a sort of clenched fist, saying he plans to fight on. The Sunday Mirror says that nearly £10 billion of COVID fraud has been tracked down. But the tabloids take different tacks. The Mail on Sunday splashes with Meghan Markle's sick father, Thomas, asking her to visit him. And the BBC website's leading on our main topic of conversation today, how to get young people into work. So let's crack on then. Now, James, your business deals with employment, one of the biggest recruitment companies in the country, so you've got a very good handle on exactly what's going on. Do you think the government is making it easier or harder for young people to make a good start in life?
Well, I'm very interested to hear what Mr. McFadden has to say next, because it's certainly really challenging for young people at the moment, and it's becoming more so. It's getting harder, not easier. And there are a number of reasons for that, but one of them, I must say, was the budget last year, when taxes were put up on employers' national insurance. And that's seen a reduction in jobs in areas like hospitality, which were obviously common entry points for young people. We've also seen a collapse in graduate vacancies. But this has been going on for longer, 3 or 4 years now. And I think that's more to do with AI and new automation in the workplace. So you have a combination here of pressures on employers that are leading to fewer jobs and fewer opportunities.
It's a different pressure, but that direct cause, you think, from the government's decision to put up NI has made a difference. Lawrence, you campaign for the economy to get growing, but do you think the situation at the moment with nearly 1 million people out of work, what's that about? Is it about the pandemic? Is it about the economy struggling? What's your view?
I think I agree with James. It's actually multiple things all happening at once. There is, of course, technological changes, but it's also the case that a lot of companies are leaving. We were actually, I was speaking earlier about the fact that, and we've mentioned a few times now, startups in this country, it's very, very good to start businesses here. It's actually quite difficult to scale businesses here, and a lot of them leave overseas, and that means when they start really expanding into jobs, maybe 100, 200 people, they're taking all those jobs overseas, and we're not seeing them here for graduates, for people here in this country. It's good to start businesses here, hard to keep them here.
And Eva, when it comes to the politics of this, do you think that the government understands the depth of feeling among younger voters about how difficult things are?
I think they do understand, but I also do think that they feel they need to impress business and they need to impress landlords more than they do young people, and that's probably because young people don't tend to vote in a large enough cohort as they should. But, you know, look at the budget. You know, we've just spoken about it twice here. The minimum wage was increased to £12.71, right? That's good news on paper. But look at the other factors that young people are facing. If a graduate is coming out of university now earning £26,000 on minimum wage, how on earth are they going to afford to live in a big city when rents are around £1,000 for a dirty room on the outskirts of a big city? When you've got all of these factors, when you look at them in the round, it's simply unaffordable.
So it's a pretty unappetising cocktail of things that the government has to try and sort out, but we'll try and get to the bottom of more of it today. Thank you all for now. So what on earth is going on then? There are all these different factors that our panel have just mentioned, but the upshot, if you're between 16 and 24, there's right now more than a 1 in 10 chance that you're not up to much, not in a job, not on a course or an apprenticeship or in any kind of professional training. Nearly 1 million young people are in that position, but more than half of them say they have a health condition. 1 in 5, a problem with their mental health. But with unemployment going up in general, finding something to do or a wage to earn is far from straightforward.
Hello everyone, my name is Alfie, I'm 21, I live in London and do a tech apprenticeship.
Hi, I'm Hidil, I'm 22 and I'm from Kingston.
Hello, my name's Harvey, I'm 23 from Walsall, Nottinghamshire.
My name's Bella and I work as an agency SEN primary school support worker.
The number one concern surrounding young people work and benefits, I feel, is not knowing the opportunities.
I'm on minimum wage and I don't get paid during school holidays, so there are times with no income at all. Even when I worked full-time, I still needed universal credit every month to stay afloat.
I'm care experienced, and when I was on universal credit, I wanted to apply to university, but my social worker didn't even know what UCAS is.
I've done my GCSEs, I've done my A-levels, I've pursued higher education. It was difficult to get into jobs, and sort of entry-level jobs weren't as fulfilling as and it wasn't something that I could see myself doing in the long term. I never thought I'd be able to do like an apprenticeship and stuff, and now I'm looking into doing that.
I really want to work. That's not what the problem is. It's more just, it's disheartening applying for all these jobs and then we get no feedback, no response, and then ignored, basically.
Just some of the young people who are having a really hard time for all sorts of different reasons. Pat McFadden, welcome to the studio. I just want to put the number up of the number of young people who are in this situation, because this is the reality. 946,000 16 to 24-year-olds not in education or training. And that's a really pressing situation. You're announcing today more details of the government's youth guarantee, but how many actual jobs is that scheme going to provide?
So that's the number that we begin with, 946,000. That's gone up from about 2/3 of that level a few years ago. Been a very sharp rise in the last 4 years. What we're announcing today is an £800 million scheme that will get intensive advice to 900,000 people. We will get work experience or training to 300,000 of them, and ultimately we will have a subsidised job offer for the most persistent long-term youth unemployment, and that will cover 55,000 subsidised jobs.
So it's 55,000 jobs for nearly 1 million young people.
Well, that's
how on
only,
earth is that enough?
That is only the people who don't get a job through the training, which has got a high success rate. So that won't be the sum total of it, but that is particularly directed at those who've been out of work for 18 months or more. I want this to become a Labour cause. This figure that you put up on the slide isn't just a denial of opportunity. It's a big issue of inequality around the country too, because if we were to break that figure down to geographical areas, you'd find it was worst in some of the poorest parts of the country. And within the figure lies all sorts of other things too, which we may come on to talk about, the levels of sickness and so on. So the youth guarantee that we're announcing today is a strong offer of help to hundreds of thousands of young people in that position. And it's about more than a policy. It is saying to young people, we believe in you, we have faith in you. Looking at the clips we've just seen, they all said they wanted to work, the young people. They've been written off too readily. This is the government coming forward with backing and support for them.
Well, let's just go through some of the detail then. Which employers have signed up to help you with this?
Well, we've got supportive quotes today from, for example, Kier, the construction firm, from Severn Trent, from the CBI, from the British Chambers of Commerce. What we'll do with this is it will begin in 6 parts of the country from April: Birmingham and Solihull, Greater Manchester, Central Scotland and so on. And then it will become a national programme towards the end of next year.
But how many employers do you actually have standing ready to say, yes, we believe in this, we will be willing to offer either training or jobs or apprenticeships to young people who are eligible for this? Because supportive quotes on a press release is a very different thing.
Well, we've got good partnerships with employers in retail, construction and other sectors. And in the 6 areas that I mentioned, what will happen now after the announcement is we will get the employers to sign up to offer the training. There's no reason why they shouldn't, because it's backed by government money and government investment. And ultimately, on the subsidised job, the government will actually pay for 25 hours work a week at minimum wage level. We understand that taking people on is a risk, and that's why we think the government should step up and help employers do that.
And will young people lose their benefits if they say no to opportunities that are offered to them like this?
Without a good reason, yes. Sanction is part of the system. This is an offer on one hand, but it's an expectation on the other, because the future we don't want for young people is to be sitting at home on benefits when there are other options out there, be that training, work experience, or the subsidised job.
And what's a good reason to say no?
Well, look, I understand someone can have a family emergency where they can't make an appointment and so on, but if someone simply refuses to engage in it, then the conditionality, which is part of the benefit system, will apply.
The offer, though, only kicks in after somebody's been on benefit for 18 months. So given what you've said, that this is a moral mission, that any day somebody sitting at home doing nothing can have a sort of scarring effect, why on earth wait 18 months?
Well, that's the backstop of the subsidised job, but people will be offered the training and other parts of the offer long before they've been out of work for 18 months.
That definitively in all cases, people will get an offer, what, straight away? If young people are on benefits?
Well,
they will
certainly long before 18 months, but the 18 months is when you've been through training, you've been through work experience, you're still not working, then anyone who is still in that position after 18 months, who's a new claimant, gets the subsidised job offer.
Would the smarter thing now not have been, as we've just heard from James Reid, not to make it more expensive for employers to hire young people? Because he's got some of the best data in the country on employment, and he says your decision to put up national insurance for employers means that young people are not being taken on. And that's the problem here.
Well, we understand that taking on anyone is a risk, and we try to help with that risk in a few ways. For employers taking on someone under the age of 21, there is no employer's national insurance to pay. It's a tax break recognised in the system to encourage people to take on young people. We've also recently, my colleague Peter Kyle, reached a very important agreement in the Employment Rights Bill to build in a 6-month period before unfair dismissal.
But you've put up tax on business, you've made it more expensive to hire people. We've literally just heard that from one of the most prominent recruiters in the country. Do you acknowledge that there's a trade-off here? Maybe the Chancellor's made your job harder. It's more expensive to get people into work.
No, I don't think so, because when you look at that NEETS figure of 946,000, it's been going up for 4 years. It's also international. I had a call the other day with G7 employment ministers from around the world. This is an international problem. It's partly impacted by technology, partly impacted by post-COVID factors. I don't think we fully know, which is why I've commissioned former Health Secretary Alan Milburn to really get under the bonnet of this and find out what is happening with young people in activity and work.
Well, let's come on to that then, because the rise in the number of people on long-term sick who put that down to mental health is incredible. We can show people the numbers. It's gone up by 76% since 2019. I know you've commissioned Alan Milburn to go and look at this, but do you believe that all of those people should be off work?
I doubt they should be off work, and I know this is a sensitive issue about the increased reporting of both mental health and neurodiverse conditions. They're not the same thing. There's been a big increase. That's one figure. There are lots of other similar
stats that we could look at.
The proportion of young people not in employment, education or training reporting long-term sickness as the reason has doubled in the past 10 years.
So what's that about?
Many of them cite these mental health conditions. So I think my colleague Wes Streeting has been absolutely right to commission a study into prevalence and diagnosis. But I'm asking a different question. The question I'm asking is, whatever lies behind the increased reporting, what should the policy response be from government? And candidly, I don't believe it should be an offer of benefits where you're written off, signed off, and we never speak to you again, because the long-term scarring effects of that on a young person are really serious.
Should there therefore be a higher bar for people to start claiming benefits in the first place when they have mental health issues? So you clearly think they shouldn't all be in that position. Should it be harder in the first place to claim a benefit for mental health?
Well, I think we need a better policy response. That's why I've asked the former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, to look into this, because I think we should have a higher ambition than just saying to people, we can keep body and soul together by giving you benefit. What we really want to do is change the course of your life. And that's why I think this NEETs issue should be a progressive Labour cause. As I said, it's about inequality, it's about the story of people's lives, and that gets to the heart of what the welfare state should be about. We can regard it as a passive distributor of benefits, and I'm sure it can do that job, and we can have a debate about the costs. I think we should be more ambitious. It should be a platform for opportunity for those who can work. And if you're asking me, do I believe there are almost 1 million people, young people in the country, who really can't work? No, I don't, and that's why we're coming forward with the kind of policy that we've announced today.
Some people also, they look at the system and think it's not right, and one of the problems here is that some individuals in some circumstances can claim more from the taxpayer if they're not well enough to work, rather than if they're just out there looking for a job. Do you think sometimes people make a very logical decision, perhaps, to claim ill health to increase their income?
I think incentives matter, and that's why we've legislated to change them. We legislated to narrow the gap between what people got for being standard unemployment and the extra health element in universal credit.
But shouldn't you close that gap? Well, because right now, as you've just said, you know, people on health-related benefits can get more money if you're on the sick than if you're looking for the job and on the dole. And I don't want to oversimplify it because it's a complicated system.
More money for being sick has been part of the system for a long time, but we are changing this, and this is important because I think it's under-noticed. Under the Tory system we inherited, people got double the money for declaring themselves unfit for work. We've cut that difference in half, not only by cutting the extra health element, but by increasing, for the first time in a long time, the rate for standard unemployment. The system that we inherited, in effect, offered people a choice between penury or being declared unfit for work. That is a bad set of choices to offer people. So on 2 counts, deal with the incentives through the legislation that we passed, but also deal with the support, because the other part of the system we inherited was once people were declared unfit for work, they were often never contacted again.
But the problem you've got with all of this, Pat McFadden, is you could argue to close that gap further, or you could argue to make other changes to the benefit system, but you tried to do that as a party last year, and your backbenchers got so angry you ditched the reforms. So would you, as the new-ish Welfare Secretary, rule out having another go at limiting some levels of benefit payments?
No, I don't rule things out, but I think you're wrong to conclude that no change happened. I accept July was a bumpy period.
You had to ditch £6 billion of savings that the Chancellor wanted to get, and that's what coloured the whole budget.
But it's a mistake to conclude from that no change happened. This change in the balance between the health part and the standard part of universal credit was the biggest change to universal credit since it was introduced about a decade ago. In addition, the employment support is really important here, because too many sick people, long-term sick people, have been written off with no contact. We are investing substantial amounts in reaching out to people now, again, like the young people, and saying, we're not going to write you off, we're going to help you into work. We've got a Connect to Work programme, which has got £1 billion in the next few years, and more through Pathways to Work, to reach out to those people and say, we won't write you off. So it's about incentives and support.
But you're also, and I can hear you saying to your party, do not think that I am done looking at the welfare budget. You are not ruling out further cuts to some benefit payments in the years to come.
No, we're not, because I think it's a mistake to conclude, as I said, that after July that means no reform is happening.
And you've explained that.
It is being reformed. I've asked Alan Milburn to do this work. Stephen Timms is looking at PIP. This is a system which we should always look at. And if I zoom out for a minute, what I think's happened with this system is it was introduced many years ago. It had the incentives we've spoken about, and it's now dealing with, if not a different set of conditions, then certainly a different balance of those conditions being reported. And to ask if it's fit for purpose in that is exactly the right thing to do.
Is it fit for purpose?
I think it needs changed.
So
I
no.
think it needs changed.
I want to just for a second contemplate, though, this whole picture of where young people are in this, whether it's welfare or anything else. It is harder to pay the rent as a young person. It's harder to find a job. You might find it harder to be able to pay off your student debts. There's a huge generational change between what people who were in their 20s 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's completely different. And when you look at the polling, the Greens are scooping up. Reform are doing incredibly well with some younger voters. Do you, as a government, think that you've got a handle on this gap here? What are you really offering younger voters?
Look, I think young people haven't had the attention that they deserve. I think there is something in that. That's why I think this youth guarantee package is so important, because these numbers have been up for years and no one did anything about it. I also think on the housing front, it's become more difficult. That's why we've got such an ambitious target to build more houses. A lot of young people are renting. We legislated to improve renters' rights too. So I think across the piece, young people in this country need a better deal. I think they need a sense that the government that's in office believes in them, backs them, and we want to do that. And that's why we're bringing forward this package today.
And if you look at the polling, they don't even remotely seem to have that sense. And one of your own ministers, Josh Simons, wrote online something slightly rude about life for the 20s, 30s and 40s. He said, I can vouch. I've got 2 kids, a third on the way. It's impossible to have kids and save for a home. And he goes on to say something rude about what it's really like. If that's one of your own ministers saying that life for the under 40s and even the under 50s in this country is dreadful, haven't you got a big problem?
Look, I think there's a point that young people in the fields that we talked about, in housing and employment, have not had a good enough deal. And that's why we should come forward with these policies that we are. So I think there is a point here. Young people do need a better deal. They need a government that believes in them. And that's why I think this is an important progressive cause, to say to people, we will back you, we'll back you with opportunities. We do not want to see you living out your life on benefits.
I just want to ask you briefly about another issue. Many viewers might have seen an independent review into carers allowance found recently that your department, the Department for Work and Pensions, had made many failures over a number of years. A senior official, a man called Neil Cowling, wrote on an internal website that part of the problem was down to carers' mistakes. Now, Ed Davies said that was disgusting. It's been suggested that was victim blaming. I just wonder, have you spoken to him or other people in your team and asked them to apologise, or what do you make of that?
What he said is not the position of the department. This was a long-standing problem that had been ignored by the last government, like many other things that we're having to deal with. We commissioned Liz Sace to do a report on this. She came forward with recommendations, and let me be clear on behalf of the department, we support her report. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix the issues that were wrong with payments to carers. That's the position of the department as I set out when she reported, and it's also the position as the Permanent Secretary set out to the Public Accounts Committee just a few days ago.
OK, Pat McFadden, Welfare Secretary, thank you very much, Steve, for coming and see us on a Sunday morning. As ever, remember, we want to know what you think. We've covered lots of issues there with Pat McFadden. You can send us an email, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you're social media inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura K. And the WhatsApp number is there for you too, 08000 282 161. Ava, very interesting. We covered lots of issues there with Pat McFadden about the generation gap and benefit payments. Clear, though, he's not ruling out having another go at making welfare cuts.
I also have to say it did sound a little bit workhouse, didn't it? You know, you are going to get into the workplace or you're not going to have any money at all. You know, it just sounds a little bit Victorian to me. And, you look around the country, you look at the various strikes that are ongoing at the moment. I'll point to Birmingham, where there is a bin strike that's been going on for nearly a year, or just over a year now, and that is because £8,500 was going to be taken away from these workers. When you look at an example like that, if you're a young person, would you believe that work pays? Would you see yourself, why would you bother if the government aren't going to pay for your time to be there in the first place? And then you look at expenditure. We're coming up to Christmas this year. We've just had the Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales, or, whatever that American import that we have. Yeah, the frenzies, yes. When those figures come out, I think we are going to be astounded at how little money people have spent over that weekend. And it's because people don't have any cash in their account. Why would you bother going to work if it doesn't feel like it pays?
James, when you heard Pat McFadden talk about this scheme, let's just concentrate on the scheme for a second. Do you think what the government's going to do will make a big difference? He said 50,000 paid jobs in the end and promises of advice and work experience in the interim.
I think it's really positive that this is getting some attention, because it really needs to. And work is so important to people, as for their personal dignity and purpose in life. So I think it really should become a progressive campaign, as he sort of said. I think it's a beginning. What worries me is, someone who's been neat, as it's described, for 18 months could be pretty demoralised. And I think it would be much better if those early interventions came a lot sooner, so young people progressed into doing something straight away.
And do companies want to take on young people, I suppose?
Well, it's a good question. You do need employer goodwill. And, a lot of employers themselves are struggling at the moment and finding, the business is really tough. So you need to engage employers. And I think it's important that they're really part of this process. Yes, they do, though. I remember years ago when we started in Hackney, our New Deal programme in 1998, I was interviewed by John Humphreys of this parish on the radio, and he said, well, what's the point? There are no jobs in Hackney. And I remember saying to him, we're just going to ask employers to give a young person an opportunity like we were once given, as an older person. And because everyone gave each of us an opportunity. There was someone out there who did that. And we went out into Hackney, and within 2 weeks, we had 1,000 vacancies in a really difficult area. So if there's a real engagement in the community and everyone wants to help young people, we can really make a difference. And this is so important. There's a large number of people who are neat at the moment, but there's also a whole lot of other young people coming up behind them. And they must not progress into that situation. We must find a better way.
Lawrence, do you think that the government has got a handle on the scale of this? Because Pat McFadden was sort of hinting there is something else going on, there's a sort of different mixture of conditions and all the reasons that you guys were talking about at the beginning of the programme. I
don't think they've got a handle on this. It's good to hear that they're talking about doing something on this. I think young people in this country have been systematically, essentially ignored. I certainly think last election there wasn't anything really on the table for them. I think they have been kind of forgotten, thought that things will just work out for them. And we are now in a pretty devastating situation. You see nearly 1 million young people out of work. And like you say, when we're looking at 18 months or more, it's not just demoralising. There's often people who've spent in hundreds of applications, received nothing back. At the moment, between 2022 and 2024, the number of scam job adverts has increased by about 130%. People are now applying to jobs, sometimes in their hundreds, and finding that these things don't exist at all. They're just used for data or otherwise. This is like an actual scandal. And young people are facing this at the same time as rents, because we're not building homes where they need to be. We haven't got the energy infrastructure, so their energy bills are super high. It's actually also what's causing a problem in industry. The whole thing is circular because we are not sorting the foundational problems in this country. What
then, though, Eva, about the issue of the really steep rise of claims due to mental health that young people are reporting? Do you think sometimes that is overdone and people are choosing to give that explanation?
I'd have pretty poor mental health if I was looking at that salary. If I was looking at living with my parents for the next 10 years with no chance of moving out, yeah, I would have pretty poor mental health. But I also do think we need to remember that we came out of a pandemic and we should really be on a war footing with this. We should think of, in the same way that the Attlee government thought after World War II, we should think, how do we get this country productive again? How do we get this country moving? We have to spend and invest in these people. You've got children who are not socialised. You've got university students who never spoke to their peers. That is going to have an effect on a child's psychological, how they've grown up. It's going to have an effect on their well-being. And we should look at them as investments to pour money into, rather than you sort of, throw them to the wayside and say, well, just get onto the working ladder and get on with it.
But James, what do you see as that change, coming into contact with people looking for work?
Well, I mean, it'd be good at a policy level, as you were sort of pushing, to see everything aligned, you know, so that you weren't putting taxes up on jobs at the same time as trying to get young people back into...
He wasn't too into your suggestion that it was partly the government's fault.
Well, no, I mean, the horses have got to be pulling in the same direction would be a starting point. And we've got to get the economy going, because it's small and medium-sized companies that create jobs and give opportunities to people. And that is vitally important, because if that doesn't happen, you know, we're going to have a larger and larger group. Because unemployment is rising. It's 5% now nationally, but it's 15% for young people.
And I remember last time, roughly this time last year, I think you came on and you said what we're seeing in the labour market looks kind of worrying, and I predict that things are going to take a turn for the worse. Now, sadly, you were proven right about that.
I wish I'd been wrong, but that was correct. Yes.
What are you seeing now?
Well, we're seeing a continuing job drought. You know, there's a scarcity of jobs.
A job drought?
Yeah, I'd call it a jobs drought. I mean, it's been going on for 39 months in a row. Last period, 40th, I think it flattened out. So we might have hit the bottom. I don't know. But our data is showing a continuing decline in vacancies, 16% down in November year on year. So this is a continuing problem. It's a big issue.
Lawrence, do you think that sounds about right to you? I mean, you're working in a...
I mean, you know, we talk to people up and down the country looking for growth, and one of the things we keep hearing, particularly from people in their early 20s, is I'm applying to jobs all over the place. I can't seem to get anything. Ones that are there, about half of them seem to be fake to me. I don't hear back. I'm just giving them data and information. But we know also from the stats, you know, it's about 140 people applying for every single graduate place. Like, it's not that people don't want to work. There are, of course, some who are, you know, using the system in whatever way they are to actually get by. But there are a lot of people who are actually trying to contribute to society and, for instance, want to build companies, want to build things. But it is incredibly expensive in Britain. We haven't built the infrastructure for years. We have not allowed Britain to build, and because of that, everything is more expensive.
And do you think that the welfare system, as it currently is set up, does incentivise people to not take part?
I think it's that, but it's also the case that our actual work environment incentivises that. If it is the case, which it is, it's easy, or it's a good place to build companies here, but to flee overseas, essentially, once they become larger, that is a place where we see jobs going. We will keep seeing this. It'll be the continued pattern until we fix the foundational problems of this country.
Eva, just finally, this is now a very, very political conversation, this conversation about welfare and particularly mental health. You know, the government's doing various reviews, but it's a regular source of clashes in politics right now. Do you think that the government is at political risk if they don't deal with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at the Labour backbenchers who've been clamouring around mental health. You know, why on earth were the promises about mental health facilities and availability that Labour made before they went into the election? Where are those promises? Why haven't they materialised? And to your point about national insurance contributions, you know, why don't we look at, instead of small, medium businesses, why don't we look at big businesses like Tesco, for example, who turned over £2 billion in profit last year? They can contribute. And why don't you put that money back into youth mental health services, and then maybe we might gain some productivity.
Well, we talked a lot about the budget last year. That was something, not last year, last week. Was it last week? Who knows when it was? It's all going by in a bit of a blur as we head towards the end of the year. We'll be back with you in a few minutes. Thank you all three of you for now. So let's stick then with welfare, that political conversation. The Conservatives presided over a huge rise in the amount we spend as a country on pensions and benefits. Before they lost the election, they said they'd start to find billions in savings. But now, Kemi Badenoch says they'd cut even more, much, much more off the benefits budget. The Conservatives now say they're aiming to save £23 billion from the bill, and they reckon only UK nationals should be eligible for most welfare payments, and they say that fewer people should get subsidised mobility cars. Well, Helen Whately is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, and she's here with us. Good morning. Thank you for coming in. Now, today you're saying something specific, that you'd want people with ADHD, mild depression or anxiety to stop getting mobility cars. That's where you can get subsidised vehicles. How many people would that affect?
Well, one of the problems actually with Motability is there isn't the transparency there should be about who is actually getting those cars, because it's a scheme that the government funds but doesn't have control over. But one of the reasons why we're talking about this is because Motability exemplifies what has gone wrong with the welfare system. Motability was set up so that people with severe disabilities should be able to get themselves around, but it's a scheme that has expanded hugely over the years. Last year, 3 billion was spent on it, and the amount spent on it went up by 10%. But actually, we haven't got a 10% increase in people's disabilities in the last year. So we're saying something like Motability should go back to what it's intended for, helping people with severe disabilities, not, for instance, whether it's tennis elbow, acne, or, as just said, ADHD, as reasons for getting a free Motability car funded by the taxpayer. And I should say, and this is one of the things that's become so unfair about our benefit system, you've got people who are paying taxes, funding these cars, who can't even afford a car themselves, to see somebody else getting one. That's very unfair.
But you can't tell us how many people would be affected, though, by the change you want to make.
Well, as I say, actually, this is part of the bigger reforms that we want to do for the welfare system. And one of the things that we have said is that overall, we shouldn't be having people getting sickness benefits for things like anxiety, milder mental health conditions, and aspects of neurodiversity, different thing like ADHD. And there's research being done which says that you could save around £7 billion to £9 billion from doing this. This is a big area where actually it's the right thing to do as well, and it's very important. We don't want to see the government writing people off.
But let's just stick with this policy, because you are putting it forward today, and the facts and the numbers do matter, of course. In October, you said millions are getting benefits for anxiety and ADHD along with a free Motability car. Now, you said millions. We've looked at the numbers. There are 1.1 million, not millions of people getting benefits for those kinds of conditions. And in total, there are 190,000 people with mental health conditions who are eligible for a car. Isn't it important, while we have this debate, that you get your facts absolutely straight?
So yes, and I know, and I was making a general point about the problem that we have with very large numbers of people getting benefits, as I said, for things that actually people would be better off in work. And as we know, the evidence tells us that actually often with a milder mental health problem or something neurodiversity like ADHD, you can be working and you would be better off in work.
But in terms of the impression that you're giving politically, if you say millions of people are getting a free car and actually it's less than 200,000, isn't that pretty misleading?
So I think what I'm expressing is the frustration that people feel with our welfare system at the moment and with the way the country is, where you've got people who are working as hard as they can, whether they're working double shifts, they're trying to pay the bills,
hear that from
and they're
our
just
viewers
seeing their
every week.
taxes going up, and they don't feel that the government has a grip on this, and they are right about that.
We hear that from our viewers every week. That frustration is obviously very real. But as a senior politician, isn't it important also to have this debate in a way where you're sure of your numbers rather than saying something that's completely misleading?
Well, actually, I think, and if you listen to what I've said about this over many months, I come at it with a thoughtful approach. So I feel and I hear and I know the anger that people are feeling with our system. But actually, when I was first an MP, I turned up campaigning because I wanted to have better mental health care. I campaigned because I saw how bad the healthcare was in the NHS for people with serious mental illness, things like schizophrenia, psychosis. And I campaigned to have the NHS do a better job there. And one of the things that's happened over the years, and it's a good thing, is that there's been a reduced stigma about mental health and people talking about their mental health. But what we've also seen is this huge surge in people getting sickness benefits. And that is not the right thing for those individuals or, in fact, for the country.
And how many people do you think should lose entitlement to those sickness benefits for the reasons you've outlined?
Look, so what I'm doing in opposition, I have two things. One is to hold the government to the account for things they're getting wrong. I think they're getting a lot wrong. And the other is to work out what I think we would do differently after the next election, when things will have moved on. And actually, well, I say things would have moved on, but will they? Because one of the things we see, and we heard it from Pat McFadden again, is them talking about the fact that they want to reform the welfare system, but being completely unable to do so because the Labour backbenchers don't back that.
Well, you say you'd save 23 billion from the welfare bill. That's now your new ambition. And one of the headline promises in that is restricting benefits only to UK nationals. So if someone has lived here legally for years, they've paid taxes for years, and say they got hurt in an accident that was no fault of their own, they wouldn't get any benefit.
So we're saying that if somebody is in a situation where they've got what's called indefinite leave to remain or limited leave to remain, they're not a British national, no, they shouldn't be entitled to benefits through our welfare system.
Even if they've been here for years and paid tax here?
There will be people who, if they've been here for many years and been contributing to the system for many years, may be eligible to become British citizens. That's a different situation.
But if they're not citizens, no benefits.
For people who have not contributed and not in that position, no, we simply can't be a cash machine for the world. And we have got to get a grip of this.
And how much money do you think that would save? So there's some estimates out there say it might be around £7 billion. Is that what you would expect from making that change?
So we expect that would be in the region, again, of about £7 billion if you look across universities universal credit and the sickness benefits system. So that is one of the areas where we see there would be savings, as well as we need a more fundamental look at our sickness benefit system, because it just simply isn't working for the country. It was intended to be a safety net, and our welfare system isn't a safety net now. In fact, and if you look at some of the analysis that's been done since the budget, there are many people who are just saying, I would be better off on benefits. Why bother to work when I could be on benefits?
Well, actually, that was the position and the policy that was brought in by your government over many years. We've just had Pat McFadden explaining how people can get, in some circumstances, more by being on sickness benefits than being on employment benefits while they look for a work. That was your policy. That was your decisions over the years.
I mean, I won't for a moment suggest that we got everything right in government. We made mistakes. I recognise that. Goodness, we lost the election. People were angry with us. But if we look back at our record, from 2010 through to the pandemic, we brought down the levels of unemployment. We brought down the levels of people on benefits. And we got more people into work and saved money on that. Then from the pandemic onwards, that bill started rising, particularly people going on to sickness benefits for mental health. We worked on reforms to do. I actually in government worked on a reform to the sick note, fit notes that GPs give out. I think that's a very flawed part of the way the system is working or isn't working at the moment. Labour came in. They cancelled all that. They binned all that. And then here we are nearly a year and a half later, and they're talking about setting off a review and a plan. They are just not treating this with the urgency that's needed.
In terms of your party's position, you say you need a more fundamental look at this whole thing. Kemi Badenoch said you could argue that welfare spending is unchristian. What's Christian about not helping people in need because of the country they were born in?
Well, I don't think that's what Kemi is saying there.
Well, Kemi, it's important to hear her words. She said the Christian tradition is about communities and families and charity, not about compulsory taxation in order to pay welfare. Some people might think absolutely she's completely correct there. Other people, like the former Archbishop of Canterbury, said the idea that welfare is unchristian is eccentric beyond belief.
Well, I think that's misquoting her from what she said. And she's not saying there shouldn't be a welfare system. I mean, and I talked to Kemi about this clearly. And the principles that she brings us, I bring to this, is, well, we want a system that backs people who are doing the right thing, who are taking personal responsibility. If you can earn money to pay for yourself and your family, well, of course you should do that. We shouldn't be taxing you so it no longer becomes worthwhile to even pay your own way. We want a system that is fair. It feels very unfair to people at the moment when they can see somebody who's got a new car through the benefit system when they can't even afford to get a car themselves because their taxes are so high. We should have a welfare system which is a safety net, not an alternative to working for those who can work.
Just briefly, Reform has now had its first defection from a member of the House of Lords, a Life peer, Malcolm Offord. Why can't you keep people in your party?
And as I said a moment ago, I know people are angry and frustrated with some of the things that happened when we were in government, particularly through the pandemic and
hang on, it's one of your own people choosing to buddy up with Nigel Farage.
I will hear, and I will come to it. I mean, the thing I would say is what Reform is offering to the country is very different from what Kemi Badenoch's Conservative Party is offering. We recognise the seriousness of the problems that the country has, and we're doing the work to come up with an alternative plan to fix them. We've talked about how we will make savings, 47 billion from public spending, so that we can reduce the deficit, cut people's taxes and grow the economy. We have a plan. Nigel Farage does not. On welfare, he said he'll lift the two-child cap, spend more on welfare. That is not the answer to the country. We are working on the right answers for the country.
OK, Helen Whately, Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, thanks very much indeed for coming in and being with us this Sunday. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there is plainly an appetite right now for politicians who are prepared to do things differently. How differently? Well, that's another question. How about falling out with each other before it even has a party name and trying to chuck out some of its own new members too? Here is a quick look back at the start of the new group on the left, Your Party.
It's news that's only recently broken by Zarah Sultana. She said Jeremy Corbyn and I will co-lead the founding of a new party.
It's finally here. Or is it?
There were immediately reports in the Times that Jeremy Corbyn was bewildered by the timing of this announcement. He's now saying we're in discussions. It sounds like he wants to lead it.
Then Zarah Sultana launched a membership drive, which allies of Jeremy Corbyn said was unauthorised.
Feeling sidelined, Zarah Sultana lashing out, accusing Corbyn of overseeing a sexist boys' club.
They are now publicly fighting over money.
I'm sorry for the confusion in getting to this point.
Over politics.
Witch hunts on the eve of conference, smears.
It's difficult to overstate just how far the infighting has gone.
Well, your party had their first big conference last weekend and they did decide to be led by a committee, not by one MP, and to stick with calling themselves your party. Well, one of the founders, Zarah Sultana, is here. She's joined us on a few occasions, first as a Labour MP, then as an independent MP, but now representing your party. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You said there have been hiccups on the journey to establishing your party, but that puts it pretty mildly. I mean, we've seen rows about your launching it on your own, allegations about it being a sexist boys' club, and a couple of the MPs have withdrawn their support. Who's to blame for that mess?
Well, neither me or Jeremy have ever set up a new party before. We've never designed its structures. And so this hasn't been an easy process. But this is a new party that is a socialist party that, like you said, is being led by its members. We've got over 55,000 members. And that tells me that there is an appetite for a party that is going to be supporting trade unions, that is fighting for people's lives to be made materially better, that is going to go out to the country and campaign, be on picket lines, and fight for a vision of this country that is drastically different to what we've been given so far.
But when the setting up of it has been so messy, it might not give people watching very much confidence that, frankly, you're going to be an impressive organisation, that you really know what you're doing. So I think it is important. I wonder who or what do you think is responsible for the mistakes that have happened?
Well, the issues that we have dealt with in the past have been about member democracy. At our conference, we put those questions to a vote, and our members have decided and voted on collective leadership, allowing dual membership, empowering our branches so they can go out and organise. Ultimately, the past few months have been really difficult, but we are moving forward. We are here to build a party that is going to have a vision of a country that redistributes wealth, that talks about nationalisation, that looks at questions of inequality and deals with them from the root and branch.
But how do people know who to listen to? Should they listen to Jeremy Corbyn, who's there on the stage, or should they listen to you, or should they listen to a committee of membership who are providing leadership? You know, political parties traditionally have worked when people know who the leader is, they're the boss, they're the one that communicates with the public.
Of course, but we're doing things very differently. We have a collective leadership which will elect a parliamentary spokesperson. So there will be someone for the media, for the public to look at, to relay what the politics is.
You or Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, there'll be an election. It will be done democratically, as has been the process thus far. A collective leadership is obviously not the way other traditional parties work, but other traditional parties are top-down machines that treat their members as volunteers who actually don't really care about the public in terms of making a difference to their lives.
But are you going to run to be that parliamentary spokesperson?
I am going to put my name forward if that's what the members want, of course.
And if Jeremy Corbyn does as well?
Well, then there'll be an election or a process to actually address that, and it will be the committee that will choose their parliamentary spokesperson.
One party on the left that has been enjoying great recent success, who have elected a new single leader, of course, is the Greens with Zach Polanski. They have been doing incredibly well in the polls. They've been growing their membership. He's even invited you to defect to the Green Party. What would your message be to a voter who looks at them and thinks they're doing well, they're vibrant, they're growing, I'm going to go there, as opposed to joining a party that is finding it quite hard to agree with itself?
I think it's important that voters have a choice and that they are able to look at the left of politics, given the fact that the Labour Party has left the scene, and see multiple parties that are speaking to their interests. Obviously, the Green Party have a new leader who's doing really well, and I get on really well with Zach Polanski.
Would you defect?
I think there has to be conversations around electoral alliances. We have to look at the next election where the goal has to be to stop Nigel Farage from getting the keys to Downing Street. But fundamentally, we are different parties. We are a socialist party. We're a party that is going to represent the working class, that isn't shy about talking about the material issues affecting workers.
Let's then talk about your vision. You said at the party conference you want to nationalise the whole economy. What would that mean for a small business or a farm or a hairdresser or a coffee shop? What does that mean?
the status quo in this country is broken. We are the second most unequal country in the OECD, second to the US. We have rampant inequality, so things have to fundamentally change. And when I talk about nationalizing our economy, I'm talking about the commanding heights of our economy. I'm talking about the utilities, energy, rail, buses, telecoms, mail, which are wildly popular with the public. But we also have to look at other forms of democratic ownership in our economy. That means workers' cooperatives, that means community land trust, that means public banking, that means a national a wealth fund that workers and our communities control.
So do you mean that a corner shop or a hairdresser is going to be run by a workers' committee? I'm just trying to understand what this would actually mean.
If you look at polling, the British public actually support a system where workers make the decisions in their workplaces rather than a CEO. So when you've got a coffee shop and you've got a small workplace, a democratic form of ownership of that is a workers' cooperative, where workers own the shares in that company, they have better terms and conditions, the profits are shared amongst the workers, and that is a form of democratic ownership that does very well across the world, including in the UK in many cases.
And would that be something that businesses had to become? Would that be mandatory?
Well, these are conversations that we should have about what forms of ownership we should have in our economy. And right now, we don't have very many democratic forms of ownership. When we look across Latin America, you've got workers' cooperatives, you've got community land trusts, you've got all of these different forms. We need to have conversations about how we can democratise our economy.
But also, mandatory might be an option.
It has to be something that we have a conversation about. Obviously, the party does not have policies yet, but it's important that we articulate a different vision of society and an economy. And actually that extends not just to corporations and businesses and our public services. It's also questions around the monarchy. When you've got a royal family with a sovereign grant that will increase to £132 million next year, and you've got Prince Andrew, who's had £12 million of taxpayers' money to defend his legal costs, a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, we need to have a referendum on the monarchy and talk about democratising society as well.
And would you campaign to abolish the monarchy?
Absolutely. I'm a Republican.
Let's talk then about foreign policy, because we've talked to you before in the studio about your view of foreign policy. Some of the statements that you've made about Russia and Ukraine have provoked some raised eyebrows, I'll say. What did you mean when you said President Zelensky isn't a friend of the working class?
When we look at legislation that has passed through Ukraine that introduces zero-hour contracts, that stops trade unions from having vetoes, that really slashes workers' terms and conditions. That is what I mean when I say President Zelensky isn't a friend of the working class. That is to say that despite the war that's happening in Ukraine, we shouldn't have to sacrifice workers. And it's important that we recognise what's happening in Ukraine is an illegal invasion. It is indefensible, but we have to look at what is happening. And Keir Starmer leading the European hawks into an endless war where the interest of Ukrainian people and the Russian people to end the war isn't there. It's simply about arms manufacturers increasing their profits, where this government just wants to sell even more long-range missiles rather than negotiations being the focus and ending this war.
Isn't the interest of the Ukrainian people and Western leaders who are leading allies of the Ukrainian government trying to stop Russian bombs and missiles from falling on their head?
The emphasis has not been on negotiations. The emphasis has not been on diplomacy. When Keir Starmer has led meetings, it has been about selling more weapons and elongating this war. As a country, as a democracy, we need to be pushing diplomacy and negotiations, because every war has a beginning. But every war must end too, and that is only through diplomacy and negotiations. The question is always how many people have to die before we get to that point.
Do you think Vladimir Putin is remotely interested in ending the war?
He has to be. He has to end this war, and it's about putting pressure, and this government already has put sanctions on Russia. Russia has already been excluded and boycotted from sports competitions, from music competitions. It's about exerting pressure on Russia to meet at the negotiation table, but it can't be with a government that is actually just focused and prioritising arms sales.
OK, Zarah Sultana, founder of your party, or one of the founders, is that how we have to do? Co-founder of your party. Thank you very much indeed for coming to talk about your new project with us in the studio this morning. Thank you. Now then, it has been a very busy morning, lots to discuss, and the fortunes of young people, what the government's trying to do about it, and those new political groupings in different places who are trying to scoop up. Ava, you have spent a lot of time covering this new movement on the left. Is it credible what they're up to?
I just want to say I was a bit confused, but maybe Zarah can answer that. I thought the spokesperson role wasn't open to MPs. I thought that was going to be a party
well, she
member,
said there was going to be a parliamentary spokesperson and she'll run for it and maybe Jeremy Corbyn will too. So maybe that's a news story we've landed on in the studio this morning.
On the point about nationalise everything, which I think has been contested in the media, I do think there is an interesting cog in that, which is, you know, you look at a company like John Lewis, which does give back its profits to its workers. And, you know, I used to be a delivery driver from them and, you know, the £1,000 or so that I used to get in April was a godsend for me. That would be a wonderful thing for companies to look at and take on board. Is it credible? At this moment in time, it looks difficult to describe it as credible, but people do need an alternative. And I think, you know, when I was sitting in the hall and listening to the sort of things people were talking about, like nationalising water, energy, those are actually ideas that a lot of Liberal Democrat voters can get involved in. So if they could sort out those arguments, then yes, it could be credible.
Still a big if, though, isn't it? I mean, Laura, do you look at political new outfits popping up? I mean, maybe even your own new campaigning group. There do seem to be new entrants that are all a bit different into our kind of political market, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty damning indictment of the current parties and the current situation that, I mean, our movement exists to argue for economic growth. This should be something which should be pretty standard and a standard desire of governments, but they actually don't want to attempt, or in fact this government is attempting but not going nearly far enough in actually pursuing the policies to invest in energy, make it easier to hire people and build companies and keep companies here.
And James, we are short of time, but I know also you and your family business have for many, many decades tried to be working in this, with government and in the economy, trying to help people. And I know with condolences that you lost your father, many people might have seen that in the news. I know you'll have lost your father in the last week. I just wonder, with the benefit of all of your years of experience, how do you see this moment for this country?
I think it's a really important moment. There could be a major disruption coming. I mean, the rise of what I'd call the A-block vote, anyone but Labour or Conservative, is very apparent, and people can choose between lots of emerging options now. And it's really unclear where the electorate will settle. So there's a lot of challenger brands that are trying to get our attention. So I think we're headed for, I mean, I don't want to disturb your viewers, but a big disruption on a Sunday morning. and I think that's coming because you have a combination of economic change that's very rapid, that's challenging jobs, at the same time as you have a political change. And so I think there's a lot coming up that we will have to navigate very carefully.
OK, well, we are going to try and cheer people up at the end of the programme because we have had some quite heavy lifting this morning. Thank you hugely to my trio at the desk. Thank you most of all, of course, to you for spending your Sunday morning with us, whether you're young, old or in between. We've been talking about the gaps between our generations and if our politicians have really got a handle on it. One cabinet minister told me younger voters were getting a raw deal. You can catch me later with Paddy O'Connell on Sunday's newscast, but from time to time, sometimes we just like to give you something that's just gorgeous just because we can. Next week is our last show before Christmas, so just in case you're not quite feeling the festive spirit yet, we thought we'd give you a taste to get warmed up. So here is Matteo Bocelli with his version of Oh Holy Night from his Christmas album. Enjoy, and I will look forward to seeing you with some more good cheer, I promise, next Sunday, same time, same place.
The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Saviour's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error.